Episode 1, here we go.
Let's go.
So first thing we're going to talk about is how did we meet? How did we get to know each other? That'll kind of build some context for the next couple of episodes as we get into it. Mm-hmm. So let's just start with, we met about a year ago. Probably a year ago, either this week or within the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So from your perspective first, and then I'll kind of tell you mine. Where did we meet? How did we meet? What was kind of going through your mind when we first interacted with each other?
Yeah. So since I'm a pastor at, East River, and I oversee the men's ministries and young adult ministry, guys like you, they draw my attention because I want to be able to connect with you guys, and so when you walked in the church, we actually had a church conference going on, and I saw you and another individual that were there. And with this guest speaker, he's a little radical. So especially if it's someone's first time at church or something, they may get blown out of the water, so to speak. So I just want to make sure everyone's good, everyone's taken care of, as comfortable as possible. I introduced myself to you and this other gentleman, but I could tell by the end of this guest speaker speaking, the other gentleman seemed like he wasn't going to come back, but something with you, there's like a resiliency. And I didn't get a chance to get your phone number and connect. A lot of people in church will come in and out. But I remember I prayed, I said, God, just let me be able to connect with this man because I can see there's something different about him. So, really, the simple answer is that when I first saw you come to East River, because my ministry is men's ministries, I wanted to be able to connect with you. And then sure enough, the next weekend we had normal service, right? Our senior pastor was speaking, and I saw you again. And so I beeline for you. I said, I'm going to get this guy's number, shake his hand, and we exchanged contact. And then we ended up going out and having lunch about a week later. And that's how the journey started from there. So I didn't know anything about you other than, as you'll probably explain here shortly, that there was a couple from our church that ended up inviting you. But that was the simple answer as far as what drew me to you in the first place.
Yep. So my side of it, I'll kind of throw in what brought me there that first couple of weeks anyways, and then just kind of my perspective. So I'd gotten out of the military in kind of the fall of 2020. Went through some hard stuff with my family. My brother passed away. I then went and hiked the Appalachian Trail the next spring. So spring of 2021, finished the trail in fall of 2021, and then spent about a month kind of traveling around, going and visiting some old friends from the Army. And I was actually planning on relocating to the East Coast. So wasn't going to move back to home base, which is Colorado, after I got out of the military and off the trail. I was actually planning on moving to like Tennessee. Ended up visiting a friend out here in Hillsboro. My last station was JBLM up in Washington. So I'd actually come down to Portland all the time on the weekends. And my friend that I knew down here lived in Hillsboro, which is where East River Fellowship, the church that you're a pastor at, is out of. And so Hillsboro and Portland were always a cool area. I came to visit him after I got off the trail. Him and his wife were like, hey, with what you're trying to do in your life right now, I was trying to start a business at the time, the business I'm currently doing now. And they said, you should come out here. You can live with us and then kind of get started and go from there. So I ended up making the decision in December of 2021 to move out to Oregon. So I moved out in the first week of January, landed out in Hillsboro, stayed with my friend for the first 4 months. That brings me up to where I moved to my apartment out in Beaverton. And then that's actually when I first visited East River. So that first, just to give kind of context, like moving out to Oregon in January was a super rough time because not a whole lot was going well in my life, dealing with a lot of stuff after the military, dealing with stuff after losing my brother, like family issues back home. So it was kind of like a dark time in my life, that first 5 months or so of living out here. Was trying to start my own business, was not being able to get it off the ground. Honestly, was just not in the right like headspace or heart space. Mm-hmm. And I grew up in the church. During my time in the military, I'd found myself in and out of certain local churches, depending on like which base I was located out of, but just could not like reconnect to any sort of faith. And I don't think as a child, I ever really had like a steadfast faith at all. And so being kind of in that darker time of my life and then truly being on my own out here, kind of without any other connection besides the one friend I knew, I was definitely looking for like community and was getting drawn back to the church. Not just the physical church, but like God and the faith piece. Yeah. So I was open and looking for that. I had visited one other church in the Hillsboro area near where I was living at the time. And then the next door neighbors to my friend, who one of them's on staff at church, they invited me to East River. And so it was actually the week that I was moving out of there, and I moved to the place that I was living at in Beaverton. And I decided to go check out East River. And it was at a very pivotal time because a lot was about to change in my life. I was going to get ready to start working for a company out in Hillsboro, take a break from doing my own thing and work for a major corporation, which I ended up doing. But I was looking for a lot: direction, purpose. I was trying to fill a lot of the void that was in my life, which the military left, and kind of like stuff with my family left. I was looking to plug into something. Work was the first option. Church was the second option. So ended up finding my way to East River Fellowship. I remember walking in there, and just the thing that I've actually heard quite a few people say about East River is walking in there, you just feel something like almost tangible, and now that's what we'd kind of refer to as like the Holy Spirit, or is what we would refer to. But it was something that was really interesting because I wasn't particularly like keen on the music. There were some guest speakers, I think the first week or two that I was there. I'm like, I don't even know what the teaching's like in this church, but I feel some sort of connection. And like my past experience with churches over the last, decade or so as an adult have been go try a place. If it's too small and too intimate, leave and don't come back. If it's big and I can kind of blend in, maybe stick around for a little bit. But that always ends in kind of the same story where not enough challenge, not enough community because I'm keeping myself from that. And then I just get bored and I leave. And so there was something interesting about East River that was drawing me there. Again, very pivotal time in my life. And it was that second time or first time whenever you had introduced yourself. And I basically, when I got there, I was totally on the fence because I could feel a reason to stay, but I also had my instinct to leave. And I kind of had like a prayer in my mind during service where I was just like, if there's a reason for me to stay, then show me what that is. And then it was like 20 minutes later, you walk up to me, introduce yourself, and then talk about getting coffee. And I don't, remember the exact timeline, whether it was the first week or second week that we ended up, actually physically connecting on mobile or whatever, but we ended up exchanging numbers. You asked me to get coffee or lunch, whatever it was. And I was just like, normally I would say no, but for some reason I'm like, well, I'm the one that asked for some direction. So let me pursue what this is. So that was kind of like my initial why I was there, and meeting you at first. So kind of next thing would be, what was those first couple of conversations like when we ended up going out to lunch and or coffee? So what were you kind of looking for? What did you kind of see in those first conversations? And I'll kind of give you my side of it. Yeah.
And just going back a little bit too, is as far as, and that's the craziest thing with all the stuff that you just listed off. Like, how am I supposed to know any of that? You know what I mean? And, our church we're not a mega church, but we're not small by any means. We're kind of in medium. We get a couple hundred people about every weekend. But when you were there and you came in, it was one of those things where we're like, Holy Spirit's like, go and talk to this man. And so with all the stuff that you brought up, what I appreciate the most is even when you're talking about how like you knew the Lord and you were seeking him out. And there's a verse in Jeremiah, he says, you will seek me and you will find me when you search for me with all of your heart. So which is really cool is that you were already on that journey connecting with him. And yes, I know church can have its differences as far as how it's done, but the church is supposed to represent who God is, right? And so in you seeking him out, it's amazing that he would just bring you in the doors that I get the pastor at, and we're able to connect. But see, that was the thing for me is I felt prompted by the Spirit to be able to connect with you, and not knowing anything of your background. So in the midst of it, for you, you're seeking him out, and it's a privilege that God is like, hey, Daniel, I want you to get involved in the plans that I'm already doing with Micah. So if I didn't enter into your life, I know that he would still fulfill for you what he has planned for you. But I count it as an honor and a privilege that I get to get out of my boring life and just do what he tells me to do and be involved with you. Because as we'll explain a little bit later, you've helped me in a lot of different ways. So it's just so cool, and that's why it's so important to introduce yourself to people, especially new people when you see them, because you don't know where they're at. So like the first questions or the first conversations we had, just from what I saw from my perspective, because you're brutally honest with me, you know what I mean? I know we can be honest with each other. I saw a lot of strength in you, right? I saw a lot of, in a good way, like resiliency in you. There was definitely a manliness to you, but I also saw a lot of hurt that was also being communicated. So I remember in the very beginning, I didn't want to not tread lightly, but I didn't want to force any type of major way of thinking on you. I just more so wanted to hear you out. You know what I mean? And then when push came to shove, what I appreciate is that even in your strength, you still have humility to where you're like, hey, like you would, I remember you would give like these, you're a very good communicator. You'd give these very strong kind of dissertations of a certain view or whatever you saw in regards to God or the church or people in general. And it was a very strong, not even opinion, just a strong, like good argument. But then what I appreciate the humility is you're like, dude, I could be 100% wrong with what I just said. So it always threw me kind of like, not in a bad way, but this backlash where I'm like, well, does he mean that? Is he writing it or what? But I noticed now it wasn't that you were saying one thing and doing another. There was this place of like, I'm going to be strong, but I'm also open to know the truth, that you were open to say, I could be wrong in this. And that's what allowed me to still have conversations with you, because we had a lot of talks for a lot of hours on very big topics, you know, and you and I coming from two different backgrounds, you know, we butted heads on some of these things, but I think the humility that you had in these conversations was very helpful to me to encourage, you know, for me to keep talking with you and moving forward. We can get into some of the content of what we talked about. But nonetheless, I think that's what I appreciated, is that not every conversation that you have, especially with new people, is going to be that you're going to be in agreement, or it's all going to be sunshine and rainbows. Like, it's okay to disagree, but you and I both were like, it doesn't matter who's right. We want to know really the truth. That's what we're getting after. Mm-hmm. So it helped me to go back and even survey on my own heart, like, why do I believe what I believe? And that's one of the things you told me. You're like, I'm trying to actually press you to know why you even know why you believe what you believe, not just because someone retorted it to you, but like, do you know why you believe this? And you're like, which helps me believe it if I know you do. So yeah, I just appreciated the way you communicated in a strength, but also with humility, as you still do this day.
Yeah, I think that for me at that point, the humility comes from, it's more recent in my life for sure. And it comes from finally being able to reflect on like my own limitations, which is what brought me to that church. Is there was a lot of things in my life that I was doing really well and, you know, could be considered like pinnacle points of life, like some of the stuff I did in the military and outside of the military with business. But what I saw was my failure in the military and my failure in business and my failure in my relationships with my families and my lack of personal relationships with friends and romantic relationships, because I was trusting myself too much. And what I finally saw once I entered into my 30s was where my end was, what my capacity wasn't. And that was something that I think a lot of people get to, especially on the outside of the military, is they see what they can't do. And for me, that was, it takes two directions. One, you're going to go into like depression and anxiety and a dark place, and you're going to seclude yourself because you're like, I'm not as capable as I thought I was. I can't solve my own problems. I can't even solve the problems of the people I care about. And I would say that's how it started for me in the, you know, first half of 2022 was I saw where my limits were and I couldn't control them. And I'd been to that place several times in my life and had figured my way out through discipline and hard work. And what I realized is it was not my discipline or hard work that's going to take me through the next chapter. It's something greater than myself.
Gotcha.
And so that's what drove me to church. And then I think the thing that you're talking about, which was extremely beneficial for me and why our relationship ended up working out so well, is I needed a punching bag in the church, so to say. I needed something that I could go up and say, I'm willing to get real with this, is the church. Because I'm looking for something real. I don't want to just plug into a church. I need faith. I need like an intimate relationship. And I need to see that firsthand from somebody that I trust. And so I kind of came in with a mindset with our relationship initially of like, well, I'm going to be brutally honest and I'm going to show him that I have an authentic heart to look for this, but I'll settle for nothing less than authentic. And so if I get a smell that you're just doing something because it's checking the box, I'm out and I'm going to keep looking for it somewhere else. And so I think that kind of led to the handful of conversations we had at the beginning, but it was also mixed with what I have to be honest with in the spirit of humility is that I was still fighting all of that. And so once I started working at that company, which is right around the exact same time frame that I met you, I gave myself to the corporate grind. Then I was working 60 hours a week or whatever, getting a lot of success there, getting a lot of that personal satisfaction and some of that void filled by the world, so to say. And so it gave me enough space between my issues and life that it allowed me to stay 1 foot in, 1 foot out of faith still. And so when I first started going to East River and started having conversations with you, it was a really good, like, this is the beginning stages of iron sharpens iron, where I'm getting malleable, but I'm not fully getting refined yet. What I was looking for is to get refined, but I wasn't willing to put myself in that hard of a position yet. And so I kind of played 1 foot in, 1 foot out. A lot of our conversations, kind of the next talking point I'll talk about is like, so I was really involved in work and you were asking me to get involved in the church. It was obvious that you could see how I could help there and that it would be a good thing for me to spend some of my energy reconnecting to something that is more selfless than just a corporate grind, chasing money. And that led to some of the conversations, which are somewhere split between like brutal honesty and my own hesitation to get involved in things. So like honesty and laziness, basically. So the honesty piece was one of the big things that I brought to you, which is I think what we kind of built our entire relationship off of is I don't trust the church because I don't trust the men in the church. And kind of the angle that I took was church can pacify men. I'm looking to be a warrior by heart because that's who I learned how to become in the military. That's what I always wanted to be. And what I felt in my faith journey is that there was a place for that too, a place for a warrior spirit, not just a submissive spirit. Now, any warrior is submissive to the cause that they're a part of. So any great soldier is working for someone or something, and they're working towards something for something else. And so for me, I was looking, how can I plug in as a soldier, not just a employee of the church type of thing. And so you met me on those grounds, and I had a lot of challenging questions about how the church structures things, anywhere from using coarse language to like, can you drink a beer? Can you smoke a cigar? Can you X, Y, and Z, whatever the little soft topics up to some of the harder ones that we got into. And the thing that I ended up learning to trust and respect about you is your willingness to meet me toe to toe on that. And some of the conversations we'd get done and I'd be like in a sweat almost because we had just battled through some stuff for hours on a walk. But that's what my heart needed. That's what my spirit needed. And that's what like me as a man needed, was that refining process. And so it started, I would feel kind of at that point. The other weird thing that was happening simultaneously with that was the Mormon church was visiting me. So that'll kind of bring us to like, you finally got me to get involved in one extracurricular event. We went to Seaside out on the ocean in Oregon on like a young adults trip for the day. And that was one of the big conversations where I was at a point where I was trying to decide, where does my faith lead me? Does it lead me into this direction that Daniel's showing me, or does it lead me somewhere else? And the Mormons had been hitting my door 3 times a week, and I was letting them come in, and we were sitting there talking about stuff for a couple of hours. And when we went to Seaside, we kind of had a whole talk about, again, I was challenging the Christian church because I'm like, the Mormon church seems more disciplined. I'm looking to be a soldier and I need more discipline. So that led to some conversations about OSL, which we'll get into in a couple minutes. But what do you kind of remember from that conversation at Seaside?
Yeah. And just even when you're talking too about about like seeing men as like passive, or seeing the Mormon church with more disciplinary, actions, like in a good way, disciplines than Christianity. That was the thing, is that I appreciated with me, like you challenged me a lot, and I think the things you challenged me on, that you did bring up about, the drinking, we're like, hey, Christians can drink, they just can't get drunk. You know what I mean? We brought up different stuff of like the foul language. You're like, why can't we say this or that? And I'm like, because the Bible says, let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth. That's why. But you're like, that's going to turn people away. So there were certain things where I was willing to hear you out and listen on. And I'm like, okay, I don't know why we're really arguing this. Like you admitted, the place of why you were trying to challenge is because there was some reservation on your end. But I appreciated the areas that you did challenge on were the ones that I took to heart, were very real. Like, why do we have so many passive men in the church? And, and one things that we are grateful for at East River as well too, is that we have strong men. We do. I mean, our senior pastor is a ex probation officer. And this dude tells us so many stories of brawls he's got in, all the stuff, even with his brothers. And that's why I appreciate it with you. Not that we have to talk about the masculinity, but that was one challenge you brought up. And just even saying that, it doesn't mean you have to be physically violent or physically aggressive. It's just a matter of being tenacious, being that man, not backing down, being a soldier, being a warrior, and what that looks like. And so that's not based off of physical strength and this and that, but it's talking about that inner man and walking that out. So when you brought up issues like that and different challenges, then yeah, I mean, it was one of those things that it made me think. So in the same thing with the Mormons, and you're talking about that conversation, it brought up for me, it's like, why are they more bold in going door to door and sharing faith with other people? So I think once again, I appreciated is what you challenged me on, that they were real things, that what you weren't just being nitpicky. It was real things that you were questioning for myself and for the church. And how you said that I had the privilege of being your punching bag. I didn't know that. So thank you for the opportunity. But I also know that that was a testament for me of what God was doing in my life, because he was allowing what you were going through to then train me up and teach me that I am a lot stronger than I think. Or I don't want to say that I give myself credit for, because I'm not saying that, but the strength that he's put in me, like you said, iron sharpens iron. As you were going through your refinement, it was refining me at the same time. So I don't believe it was any coincidence that you and I were able to be friends the way that we were, and that you were able to talk to me about these things. Because as far as I know, you didn't talk to other people in the church about these things, because you looked for someone to trust and that you could talk to. So like, yeah, I remember, I mean, we talked for hours on a number of things, and especially at the beach. But it's what you were challenging me on, more so the content of what it was. So, I mean, we could talk about Mormonism, but I think the biggest thing is that you were just saying, like, why should I give my life to, like, let's say Christianity, right? I just say follower of Jesus. Why should I give my life to Jesus? And if I should give my life to him, he better be the real deal, because I'm forsaking everything that I know. And I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. And I've been following him for 12 years. So not that I forgot where he found me. I never forget where he found me. But the stuff that you were bringing up, it was a healthy reminder for me to be like, yeah, it's not a business. We're not just a bunch of employees. We're not just here to check the box. Like, we're not just here to, collect money. That's not the point at all. Like, we're here because Jesus transformed our life. That's why we're here. But what I got from you was, you're like, Daniel, you know that, but I need to know that, and you're like, and I need to know that you know that, or else I'm not going to jump in. And I'm not military. And I know guys you have on the show are military guys, but if you were able to hear from one of your soldiers verbally, or just say you're able to read his mind, and he was just like, I'm not certain about going on this mission right here, that's not going to make you as confident. But if there's guys that are like, look, man, I don't know the fullness of this mission ahead, but I know enough for me to make a decision to say I'm going to move into this thing, then you're going to be like, okay, that's the guy I want by my side. And that's why I feel like almost in the things of faith, that's what you were challenging me on, is you're like, dude, if we're going to sit here and once again, I don't mean to disrespect, 'cause I don't know any military languages, but if you're like, bro, if we're going to bunk out in a foxhole together and we're going to go and we're going to attack the enemy together, like, you better be certain, dog, that this is where you're supposed to be. You know what I mean? Because like, I'm not going to sit here wishing that you were back at home. Like, that's not going to make me comfortable. So the way that you were pushing me, it's allowed me to be like, no, this is why I believe what I believe, not because it's been regurgitated to me, not because I'm part of a religious organization, but because Jesus Christ himself has really changed my life. And so now let me make this hard stance, let God work that strength out in me. So he's refining you, refining me at the same time. And then I was hoping you've been able to see this last year. You're like, all right, the Lord is legit in this, man. And therefore now we're friends, or we're not just acquaintances or arguing buddies, but we're actually friends. Like, you've been invited into aspects of my life with my family. As I heard someone say, a mentor of mine, he said, he's like, you need men in your life that you can trust with your life, your wife, and your finances. I mean, it's a pretty strong statement. And I'm not just saying this because we're recording, but I'm being serious. You, Micah, are the man that I can trust with my life, my wife, and my finances. And I'll be honest, I don't trust a lot of people in my wife. That's probably the first thing. I probably trust more people in my life than my wife, and that's a big deal. And even with my son, who loves you, and things like that. So, I say all that because with all the stuff that we talked about and the challenges, different things, I just appreciate the refinement that is taking place. That's like, yes, this is a hill I'm going to die on, but I need to make sure this is that hill I'm going to die on, Yeah. And so the same way that you would push your brothers in arms to move forward in a mission, you're like, dude, if I'm going to give, what you gave your life for this country, and I appreciate your service and everyone you have on here, but then at the same time, you're like, if I'm going to give my life to Jesus, he needs to be the real deal. And so once again, now looking back, I count it as a privilege that I was able to be part of that. It wasn't fun in the moment all the time. I go home to Sonia, my wife, I'm like, dude, this guy Micah, bro, I don't know what to do with this guy. Like, this guy is just like, he's so just like unorthodox. Like, I've never had someone come in and like ask all these genuine questions. And I'm like, well, dude, we walk around literally for like 2 or 3 hours and have conversations. It was just funny. So you really challenged me, bro. You and like 2 other men in my life are just unique and different. But once again, God made you that way, and we need that. We need that type of fellowship. So yeah, I just remember whether it was walking the beach for this young adult event or coffee or lunch, it was the content that you really challenged me with. And I think we've satisfied a lot of that. I think we've come to the conclusion that we can't let certain churches or even Christians speak for everybody else. It's not fair. You know what I mean? So I'm kind of curious. I don't know if we can ask this question or not, like where you saw the passivity, just some of the content we talked about, the passivity of men, or where you saw the lack of boldness in other Christians. Like, where did you pick that up along your journey to then, I don't want to say impute it on where I was at East River, but you had valid reason to bring up to say, you know, this is what I saw. So am I going to see the same thing here? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think for me, it's like 2 parts. One is like what I've been taught societally. And the other is like what I've seen with my own eyes. So like, I think society does a really good job of demonizing the church and pacifying anything to do with religion. But here's where I've seen it in the real life is when people pacify themselves. And so society will teach you generically as a man that giving yourself to God is like the weakest move you can do.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
They're basically saying you're giving up on life. You're giving up on your own ability to control yourself. You're saying, I'm not strong enough for this. So
you're weak.
You're weak is what they tell you.
Yep.
I've also seen that though, in a lot of churches that I've been to in the past and in personal people I know that are quote unquote Christians or believers, is they are using it as a very lazy cop out to life of like, okay, I don't really want to do all the planning for my life. So I'm going to put it quote in God's hands. They don't actually have the faith piece. They're just saying that. They use it externally to look stronger in the face of like the Christian community by saying, oh, I'm going to trust God to do X, Y, and Z, insert whatever. But they don't actually trust God or have the faith. They're just saying that so that they don't have to, 1, trust God or have the faith. But more importantly, 2, they don't have to put in any of the work with their own hands.
Yeah, so they're misusing it.
Yeah, 100%. So did I see that at East River? No. But I also was still on the outskirts of East River for like a good 6 months. So I think the good thing that you said that kind of ties like the next 6 months of this timeline together is that I was looking for, because I'm what I try to pride myself on. Now, again, humility will come in here in a second, is I like to be an all or nothing. I don't like to be 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And so I'm like, if I'm going to give myself to a cause, my entire life's going to be there. The military really taught me like the importance of that, of everything comes second to whatever this decision is. And so for me, I knew I was in my heart searching for, I need this big of a commitment to something that's not worldly, because I need to have something that is constant in the highs and the lows of my life. Now, the humility piece is I still wasn't willing to actually do that. So I was challenging you for 6 months straight on prove it to me. And then I was using that as an excuse to not put in the work myself. So it was a good iron sharpens iron, because I was forcing you to show me, why should I trust this? But then I also wasn't putting in all the work myself, which is where kind of the iron sharpened iron came back, because then you were saying, well, part of this is this thing called faith, which means you don't have all the answers. You don't know all of this, but you have to start believing at some point. And if you're waiting to have everything told to you, you'll never actually believe, because not everything will actually be told to you ever, because we're just humans. And so that 6 month period, the first big challenge that you gave me outside of just the conversations was August. You asked me to get baptized, and it was kind of a last minute thing. And I had been thinking about getting baptized. I got baptized when I was like 8 years old. Don't remember it. Was literally just doing it to do it. Not what I see as an adult now of like the application of baptism. So when my brother had passed away, that was something, faith was a big thing that stirred up in my life because of who he was and kind of the way he navigated himself and the relationship he had with God on his way out. And so there was this draw in my heart to get baptized as an adult, as like, this is one of those public declarations. This is how you show yourself and the world that you are more committed than just showing up on a Sunday and deciding whether or not you're going to sneak out early. And so it was in August, and you gave me probably less than a week of a heads up or somewhere around there. And you said, hey, we're doing baptisms at the young adults. You've been asking me to get involved in the young adults. I was 1 foot in the church, 1 foot out. I was working a lot. I was trying to go to church on Sundays, but was tired from work and just uninvolved in any of the extra things that you're trying to ask. And so you put that on me. And it was definitely during a week where I was getting discontent with stuff at work, just not enjoying the corporate grind. I was doing really well there, making a lot of money, but wasn't fulfilled or satisfied. And so there's like this draw where it's like, okay, well, there's this other thing that you're trying to test the waters on. Test the waters then, no pun intended with baptism. Yeah. So I ended up saying, you know what, I'm going to do this. It was a great decision, but I got baptized. I'll kind of briefly talk about that night. It was a good place in life at that point. Things were going well. My life had kind of mellowed out as far as just the ups and downs. Now is just the more minor ups and downs of work, but my bills were all paid. I was doing pretty well. I was feeling confident in like what I was achieving at work and relationships and all that stuff. Stuff with my family, stuff personally still wasn't dealt with, but like some of the surface level stuff was pretty calm and actually doing well for me. So get baptized. And I remember that night, man, dude, it just hit me crazy because you're like, hey, think about like a testimony that you'd want to share. And I'm like, well, I don't have one because I still haven't, like, this would be the first night I give my life to God as an adult. Mm-hmm. So I have no testimony yet. You know what I mean? So people were getting baptized that night and they were kind of sharing some of their struggles and all this. And then it came time for me to do it. And dude, I was like emotional all of a sudden. I was like, oh no, I don't want to cry in front of people. I don't want to get all weird. And I was like, but I am going to just speak what my heart says. And I said a very short statement. And I said, I just want rest. Because man, I was just tired. And I realized in that moment that I was there seeking out longevity to exhaustion. And I was just, life had beaten me down. Bad experiences, bad relationship experiences, bad work experiences, whatever, all of the things combined. And I just felt tired. And I was like, I'm looking for this thing that they say faith can give you, which is rest and kind of a gentle, calm understanding of life or whatever it may be. And so get baptized that night. It was a great experience, honestly. But again, in the spirit of humility, I was still 1 foot in, 1 foot out for the entire next 6 months. So that was in August, and then until January. So not quite 6 months there. Actually, yeah, right around 6 months. So from August until January, I basically worked a lot and I just followed the corporate grind more than I followed anything else. We continued to have really good conversations. You continued to invite me to get involved in stuff. I had some more ups and downs in work, a lot more ups than downs at work. Had some ups and downs with my family, had some opportunities to like mend some bridges, didn't go well. Had some opportunities to kind of like see how much I have improved and saw that I hadn't improved. And I got to the end of the year, some stuff happened with my family and I just really could see that, man, I'm 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And I just felt this conviction in December of like, you either need to give up on this faith journey or you need to actually have this faith journey. Yeah. Stop doing it from the sidelines. Stop like trying to plan it out ahead of time. This is the time where you go to basic training. So go to basic training. And one thing you talked to me about over that last 6 months was a discipleship program that you guys offer at the church called OSL. And the next starting date was in January for that. And one of the things that stood out to that during kind of our conversations of me wanting to be a manlier Christian, a more soldier type Christian, you said, well, we do have this program that's very disciplined. If you're looking for a way to kind of kickstart your faith, this program, and then you kind of talked to me about the details, and it's, a lot of requirements of reading, journaling. You have weekly expectations of participation in the church. You have expectations of going to classes during the week. You have a lot of homework, so to say, that's assigned with it, and daily Bible reading, daily disciplines. You listen to 3 sermons via audio. You go watch an in-person sermon at the church, and then you go to a class at the church all in 1 week, and then a bunch of daily stuff on top of that. And so I agreed to that because I said, all right, this is how I'll take the step of not like both feet in, is I'm going to fully commit myself to this program. We had a conversation at either the very beginning of that or right before it started. And I told you where I was at. And I'm like, dude, I got baptized months ago. My life has gotten a little bit worse, actually, not better. Yeah. And I was trying to blame the church for it, of being like, well, now I'm just torn between, do I make my own choices or do I become one of these quote unquote passive Christians that says, oh, well, I can't really control what's going on in my family, or I can't control what's going on at work. So let me just trust God. And I didn't want to take that style of approach, but I knew I was also being lazy. So went through OSL, hard time. You know what I mean? Like very personally struggling time. Everything at my work started doing really well. And it was like, that was the temptation. Everything in my personal life, way worse. And what I can see now in hindsight is by way worse means it was doing exactly what it was supposed to, which is bring awareness to me of the shortcomings in my life. So all of a sudden it was very blatant what my laziness was, what my lack of commitment to my relational family was, what my lack of commitment to faith was. And I could see it so clearly that it was really discouraging at the time and just felt like a lot of weight. And then I felt the same thing that I felt in the military, where it's like, well, this is that defining point. Now you're under adversity. Now you're under pressure. Now you can see where your shortcomings are. So do you improve them, or do you see what they are and then go run and hide? Yeah. And I'd done both in my life. I had seen the areas of opportunity to improve and put in the work. And I've also ran and hid. And so I made the choice to put in the work. And that course, the biggest thing that I took from it, and we've talked about this before, but the biggest thing that I took from it that really stood out to me was when you go to pursue your faith journey for the first time, don't keep score of the things that you feel guilty about. You're feeling guilty about them because there's a heart change and a spirit change happening, but don't focus on what your body can or can't do. And there was a lot of areas in my life that I was struggling with physically, so to say. And by physically, I mean the human world, anger, insert any common issue that a man could have. I was struggling with a lot. And what I had seen from my past, some of it was the way I was raised in church. Some of it was, disciplines from the military, but I was very critical of myself. And what I saw very clearly is a huge thing that was holding me back from my faith journey is I didn't feel worthy enough. I didn't feel like I was in the right place. And I felt like I needed to improve myself before I was capable of starting that journey. And, it's either in the Bible, or actually it is in the Bible somewhere, where it says, come as you are. And that kind of hit me heavy. And that's something that I thought about the night I got baptized, was come as you are, even dirty, quote unquote, even misguided, even angry, even still confused about what your future looks like. So that kind of took the shackles off of like, stop waiting to be perfect. Start now when you're imperfect. Because guess what? You're human. You're imperfect. That's the whole message of God and Jesus Christ is you're an imperfect thing that doesn't deserve this gift of grace and salvation, but I'm going to give it to you anyways. And it's like you have to accept the gift before you can have it. And so for me, I was like, let me clean myself up. Let me become worthy of the gift, and then I'll ask for it. And it's like, no, just take it. That's literally as simple as it is embrace it, accept it. So I did that in January. And then it was like January, February, March, part of March. Huge transformational time was starting to happen. It was like, okay, here's where the real training begins. And then it was like, I was starting to see a lot of things very clearly in my life. Okay, the current pursuit I'm doing professionally, not the goal. And that was something we had talked about a lot of like, it's keeping me out of being involved in church. I would come home from work stressed out, angry, just want to drink, just want to do whatever, because I wasn't fulfilled. I was giving a lot and I was feeling like I was helping, which was awesome. And I could see where my strengths were happening in that corporate environment, but it was all in the pursuit of money, nothing else. And I wanted a purpose deeper than that and a capability deeper than that. So that brought us to like March, where I ended up leaving that company kind of over some ethical things that were happening at the company, where I was the last person to have to deal with any of those issues. And I was the first person to negatively have action happen. Like by leaving, I lost my financial security. I was getting ready to buy a home. I was getting ready to move to Colorado. A lot of things were about to be stopped if I decided to leave that company. And there were some things that happened that just made it very clear to me of like, do you want to live in the gray area of life, or do you want to live in the black and white? Because the gray area says turn a blind eye to what's happening here, because it financially will be stupid of you to walk away from this, or live in the black and white and say, part of having faith is when you know something's not right for you in your journey, especially if you are pursuing greatness and purpose in life, well, sometimes you're going to have to take that temporary loss in order to get the long-term gain. Yeah. And so for some reason, that choice to leave that job was like the turning point. I would say for me, it was the first real act of faith that I had ever taken, because I had nothing to gain in front of me, but everything to lose in front of me by making that decision. And I made it anyways. And it was like, that was in March, and now we're in June. And from that time, March until now, has been the biggest transformational time. And so it's like that act of faith somehow cleared out the other baggage that was in the way of like, now pursue what your purpose really is. And so that kind of brought me into getting a lot more involved in the groups in church, attending church a lot more. Outside of that discipline, I ended up going through the second course of the OSL level 2. Met a wonderful woman. She went through OSL 1 as I was going through OSL 2. Yeah. A lot of things started to all of a sudden fall into place that I had been lacking: relationships, community, friendship, all because I got my own personal selfish pursuits out of the way. And I did them in a way that, even though some aspects of it were misguided, it was because I felt like it was the right thing to do for the people that I was working with. Also, this is the best way I can serve them, is to not allow this type of stuff to happen or not participate in it. And so that really showed me what I needed to see in myself. Because one thing that I can see in hindsight is that I was beating myself up a lot over certain shortcomings that had happened in life. And so it was extremely helpful to see myself have a capability by acting in faith that was bigger than what I had been able to do in the past, which was be more selfless. So that like started this chapter of my life, the more selfless instead of selfish pursuit. Yeah. And that has translated into all the relationships and friendships and business pursuits in my life now, is all, how can I serve other people, not myself? Because I actually get fulfillment by serving someone first, and my cup still gets filled in the process. I don't need to get all resource crazy and try to fill my own cup first. That's not how this faith journey works. So that kind of launched our friendship into the next level, because one, I had some time and I was able to get more involved in church, but then that kind of launched us into, we had a conversation here at my house back in March area. And one of the things I'd seen in your life over the last year of knowing you, or at 9 months at that time, was I wanted to see you enjoy life more and to embrace a certain side. And so we had a conversation about, we were a little bit out from your birthday, and you hadn't done a whole lot of things outside of like just the church that were filling yourself or helping yourself grow as a man. And so we had a conversation where I said, I'll get involved in some aspect of the church if you do something with me outside of church. And then we had a time frame for you to think about it. And you came back to me the next week with jujitsu. So that brings us to starting jujitsu. So what has kind of happened in our relationship since that? What have you learned in yourself and about each other kind of once we started jujitsu?
Yeah, I mean, this is a perfect segue, because like I'll tell the jiu-jitsu story and then kind of back it up and apply it to the spiritual aspect. Because I remember when we were talking about, you were even saying things like, "Hey, bro, that's crazy. I forgot about that," because you said you wanted me to have more enjoyment in my life, and that's been something. The word that God's been put on my heart is adventure. Adventure, joy, enjoyment, whatever you want to say. But I remember you're like, bro, even if we just rent like a dope car and just drive up and down the coast, just whatever it is, or you're like, hey, let's smoke a cigar together. I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready for all that. Like whatever it is, bro, let's have some, you need to have more enjoyment. And I do remember that. And so what ended up taking place is other events taking place physically around that, where buddies invited me to go snowboarding, that I haven't been snowboarding in about 12 years, but yet I went. I did the half marathon with you. We jogged it just to see what it'd feel like, but just finished the half marathon, a week ago. And you helped just encourage me along the way with that. So there's this, pursuit for more, for enjoyment, like you were talking about, but that conversation definitely sparked it in me. So just in a matter of from those 3 months ago, went snowboarding, ran a half marathon, and started jiu-jitsu, all from that one conversation. So, but the thing is, and this is kind of segueing a little bit into what we're just talking about and connecting this piece, is when we went in for jiu-jitsu, I remember I said, hey, let's go check out and ask for some information. It was like on a Monday. So we go to the one close to my house or whatever, and we go to check it out. And then the person helping me out, she's like, hey, we have a class that's actually going to start in 30 minutes. I'll get you a rental gi and then you can join us for class. And I'm like, what the heck? So I remember I called you. I was like, yo, Micah, you're trying to get us to wrestle, bro. Like, this is way more than just asking questions. And I remember you showed up. You're like, hey, this is what we're here for. You're like, I'm not ready at all, but here we go. And so the next thing you know, you and I have these rental loaner gis on, and you and I were partners working on arm bars. And I was like, dude, I've never done this before. And so we jump in and obviously had a beautiful journey. I can talk so much about it. But the thing that kind of caught my attention is the same way when you said like you had a desire to get baptized, but I was the one that brought it up to you and kind of pushed you. You had a desire to get back involved in community with church, but then me meeting you and being able to be that punching bag, so to speak, kind of helped you with that. Well, in the same way that you had those desires for the things of God and someone like myself got to come alongside you to help you, for me too, I've always had that enjoyment of wanting to, actually the desire for me when I was a kid was to wrestle, but I didn't want to wrestle because it was during basketball season. And at the time in my life, I liked basketball more. And also, no offense to wrestlers, but I, as a, insecure teenager, just didn't want to be wearing that singlet. So I was like, I don't think I can do that, bro. Then I heard buddies just getting stuff like staph infection and ringworm. And I had staph 2 different times due to football and basketball, actually, from just dirty equipment. So there was some different reserves, but once again, when the opportunity was presented to me to do jiu-jitsu, deep down in my heart, though, even though I had all these concerns, deep down in my heart and my inner being, I knew it's what I wanted to do. I was just struggling to get there. I was kind of being a sissy about it, But the cool thing is that the conversations leading up to that would probably be like 10 months into our friendship. The conversations leading up to it was not that I had anything to prove to you, but you were just lovingly trying to get stuff out of me to say, like, are you a man or not? Like, are you a man or not? And like we talked about, it doesn't mean that you have to be this physical, tough type of person, but you're like, are basically, I think what would even be defining for us as a man is when you know to do the right thing or to do something and you act on it. That's what makes you a man. But when you know to do something and you lack courage to do it, or you don't fulfill it, or you try to be passive and just say, oh, I just put it in God's hands. Well, then you're being the opposite of a man. And what I'm trying to say is you're just not owning up to that manliness, the way that God has made you. And so in that moment, with all the conversations we had, it's like, you know what? I could sit here and say, do you know what? I just want to watch you guys roll or wrestle, spar. But okay, give me the gi and jump in. And after we went that one time, we were completely hooked. And so that journey of doing jiu-jitsu for the last 2 months, like I signed up for my first tournament here in a few weeks. And by the time I enter my first tournament, it'll be 3 months I've been doing jiu-jitsu. That's kind of unheard of. Everyone else I've talked to is like they've done it for at least a year. And there's so many reservations that people could have. Oh, you can get hurt or this and that. But once again, it's building a confidence really a confidence in God, but a confidence in the way that He's made me, that not like, oh, I'm tough enough, whatever. There's a lot of people watching this that could beat me up. I get it. But at the same time, it's building something in me that was always there. And I think there's just so many variables that can come in the way, whether it's following God, going to church, getting baptized, anything, getting married, leaving your job, pursuing a new pursuit of like jiu-jitsu or physical endeavor. There are so many things in the way. Some are valid, right? Other things are excuses. Some are valid reasons. Other ones are just weak excuses. But nonetheless, deep down, it was always something I wanted to do. And now that I'm able to do it, it's like, that's what's making me feel like a man, is because I knew it was inward, something inward. And I've now been given the boldness to be able to act on it. One, it came from the Lord, and two, it came from you supporting me in that. So, I mean, it's teaching me a lot. I walk around not puffed up in pride. I walk around more with my head held high. My wife sees it. My son sees it. Elisha's only 3.5, and no joke, dude, this kid who we wrestle, but I taught him how to do an arm bar. So, and when you have a 3-year-old on your arm, I mean, if he pulls on you a little bit, he's almost 40 pounds. It hurts a little, but he's like, arm bar, and he gets an arm bar. So I told him for his 4th birthday, I'm going to put him in a few little jiu-jitsu classes so he can get a feel for it. We're looking online, the little gis. They're pretty cute to see a little 3-year-old, little toddler in this thing. But it's brought a lot out in me, but not anything I didn't know, but it's now what I get to experience. It's always been there, And so I just saw the connection with what you talked about with the baptism, attending church, all that. That was already in you. That was already there, but there was so much fighting it. But then finally, when you're like, you come into church and I just here for some questions, and we're like, yo, here's a loner gi, get involved. You're like, dang it, that's not what I expected. But hey, deep down, that's what I want to do. That's kind of what I see in any of these areas. Like, I didn't make you get baptized, but I was like, yo, you just wanted some questions? I'm like, get in the tank and do it. Deep down, that's always what you've been wanting to do. Same thing with the jiu-jitsu journey. And it's teaching me a lot about what you text me. You said, I'm glad you found an avenue or an outlet where you can experience God, right? and that you can just also feel that desire of the inner man that goes against the status quo. I'm proud of you. That meant a lot to me because that's exactly what it's doing. Like, one, it is for the Lord. I'm called to be a pastor, not to be a jujitsu Jedi. So my focus is him and what he's called me to do, but he's using that to supplement for me and help come alongside the man that he's made me to fulfill this pastoral call. And this is one of the dopest things is even my own senior pastor, the guy who is who leads the church, obviously under Jesus, but the guy who leads the church, he's the one that's rooting for me the most. And he's like, bro, you need to do it. I remember I got my head marked up a little bit from rolling, and I was embarrassed to come to one of the leaders meetings. I'm like, dang, because I don't want to look all beat up and stuff. And then so I told him, he started laughing, and he said, bro, he's like, I think it makes a great story to tell. I don't care if you show up to church to preach with like your face beat up and a black eye. Like, it makes for a great story, and it shows that you're just being the man God's made you to be. And he's the one that actually encouraged me to compete. He said, if you get involved in a competition, I'll come and watch if I'm able to. And I'm like, this is crazy that even like, quote unquote, my boss, you know what I mean? Obviously he's my pastor, but the fact that he would encourage me to do this is just amazing. But yeah, I couldn't have been there without you because of all the conversations that we had leading up to this. And now when the rubber met the road, like I said, not in a prideful way, but like, it's like for the first time in a long time, one, I actually enjoy it. And two, it's like, I legit, like at 33 years old, I feel like a man, because I'm able to act on this. So the jiu-jitsu, even though it's only been 2 months, and going on 3 months, it's been life-changing, but not because of jiu-jitsu itself. I mean, I really got to give credit where credit is due. It's truly because Jesus is using that avenue in my life to just continue to mold me into who he's made me to be. Because first and foremost, I'm a follower of him. That's what I'm called to do. But I appreciate how jiu-jitsu is a supplement of it. But the only people I've talked to since then, they're like, it's how many people that we've told doing jiu-jitsu, and they're like, I've been wanting to try that. And it's the same thing we talked about. You've been wanting to try. So why aren't you doing it? Why aren't you jumping in? It's that same thing of being that passive kind of man or being that warrior kind of man, and that's what separates the men from the boys, and I'm not acting like I got it figured out, but I'm just glad that through God working through you have helped me to move from boyhood to manhood.
I would say that like one of the last kind of questions I have on here is, what have we learned from each other? And you've summarized it very well, which I think what we both needed to learn and teach each other was to be a man of action. It just looked different. I think for me, you had to challenge me and say, well, being a strong Christian man means acting in faith. And one thing I wanted to challenge on was saying, well, I've seen so much of the fake acting in faith that if I feel like you should be involved in something extracurricular that's going to actually make you a better, stronger, more approachable, more aspirational leader in the church, why wouldn't you follow that? And I feel like that's what I challenged you on, was like, there's things outside of the status quo, so to say, that are your pursuit. And if you deny them, then how much faith do you actually have? And then you hit me on the other side and said, well, there's obviously all these things in front of you, but without faith, what are they? And so I would say that's the biggest thing that I've taken from it, is a very mutual call to action from each other, where it was like, what I didn't want to see is society tells you that as a pastor in church, it doesn't make sense for you to be in a jiu-jitsu gym. And in my mind, I'm like, if you want to attract strong men to church, go to the jiu-jitsu gym, which you have, and you have, brought people from that community already towards the church. And so what I needed to see is you take that type of action. And I think what you needed to see is, for me, someone that's very caught up in like the action-based physical things, to take spiritual action and to like pursue that in an honest way. So honestly, for me, that was very mutual back and forth. And it was, I feel more like a man, not by doing jiu-jitsu, but by getting baptized. You feel more like a man because we've had two different approaches to this, where it's like, we're both now on the same page, where we're both following God and serving him and trusting in him. I just came at it from trying to trust myself first. And now you're learning how to trust yourself more. Not that you're not trusting God, not at all. It's that you're trusting that God will use you to do things that you may not have expected the same way you didn't expect to be a pastor. So that's kind of the last question that I had on here. I'm getting ready to move. So what does the short-term future look like for our relationship? I know I'm going to be watching you compete. That'll be the very last thing I do here.
Yeah.
But what do you see for us in the short-term future?
Yeah. And I appreciate actually what you just said, because that is interesting how you said that you came at it from a place of trusting yourself. You say trusting yourself less. Could you repeat that again? Like you said.
Yeah, I started by trusting myself first, and now I'm learning to trust God.
Yeah.
And what I saw with you is you trusted God first, but you didn't trust yourself to go do certain things that He might be calling you to.
Yeah. So you came at it where you're trusting God more, but then I'm learning to trust myself more. And I know what you're saying by that. Like, it doesn't mean not trusting God, but that actually hit home with me, because that's exactly what it is trusting the abilities in me. It all goes back to Him, but it's like, I didn't think I was capable of doing that. Therefore, I was doubting a lot of the assignments He was giving me. Like, I'm not your guy, but He's trying to show me, but you are my guy. Because look at what you're doing. You're doing things that you would never think to do, and other people, whatever, can't do right now, whatever. So I just appreciate you sharing that. That meant a lot to hit home. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely a little sad, you know what I mean? But that you're moving. But the thing for me is, I see this a lot is, well, one, I believe we're going to be involved in each other's lives until Jesus takes us home. I don't have any concern about that. But when I see everything you just talked about of God bringing you into my life to bring me where I'm at today, I can't remain sad in it, because now what overtakes me is just gratitude. It's just a thankfulness, because we pray for things all the time. God, make me more bold. God, make me more like a man. God, let me have more adventure. Then He brings people like you in our lives. And then we're like, who the heck is this guy? You know? And He's like, he's exactly who you prayed for. Like, I'm going to give you what you prayed for, and I'm going to work through this man. It's the same thing when you came into the church, right? And then He worked through me. And so for me, it's of course I'm, sad, but at the same time, yeah, just overly grateful. And I just hope that in the same way that we helped each other get to this point in our lives, there's going to be many more things in the future. I mean, I don't know what you're going to share here. It's up to you, but you have big plans also taken ahead of you. And I want to be part of that. You know what I mean? Of any way, even if that's just a phone call, if that's a text message, if that's a, just a vacation visit, whatever it is. I mean, there's things with my son, that, I mean, he really does love you, and you got him his first Nerf gun, and I still remember when you brought it home. This is the coolest thing. This is how I know I have a good wife, because she was stoked. Like, wow, why didn't we think of that? Versus like, he's going to put his eye out, she was actually excited. And so things like that, to where, he's broken all his bullets, by the way. I don't know what he's done to him, chewed him. I don't know what he's done. He's 3 years old, but just things like that. I mean, you made an impact on him. You're obviously really good with children, and yeah, you made a lasting impact on him. So I don't think it's a goodbye, as far as like, oh, we'll never talk to each other ever again. I am sure that we will continue to have these, deeper conversations and interactions in life. I have a buddy I met from Bible college. We play basketball together. He's a pastor up in Washington, and him and I we talk for sure anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks. We never let it go 2 months, but it's about a 4 to 4.5 hour drive up north. He's near Canada. And I make it my plan to see him once a year. So actually almost every time in June, sometime in the summer, I physically see him. We play basketball against each other. We get into it, a couple street ball, moves and this and that, no refs around. But we talk on the phone every 4 to 6 weeks, because we're both pastors. We both are married. We both have children, and we're in a very similar situation. So we encourage each other. And we've been doing that for the last 3 years. And even though I don't get to see him in person all the time, him and I have a very, very strong friendship. And that's what I can kind of see similar with us. You know what I mean? It's just making a point of attention to say, we're going to see each other once a year, whether that's we come to you or you come to us, and just committing to honestly just talking off. And I know at the very beginning you have some adventures and endeavors that you're going to undergo. So maybe not right away, but I think it'd be important for us to establish something to say, hey, every month we're going to talk, And so me and my buddy, we always talk on a Thursday at 10 a.m. That's what we do. And we'll talk for about an hour and a half. It's a different Thursday depending on whenever we plan it out. But I think just being intentional and keeping that friendship is going to be key, because you've greatly impacted my life. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't think it's bye forever. I hope it's not.
Not close.
We kind of messed up, but but I think you and I are past that. That it's like, I don't think we have to have that uncertainty of like, oh, me and Micah ever talk again. It's like, no, we will, because I've said this before. I have very few friends. You know what I mean? being a pastor, especially a young pastor, it can be very lonely. I have my wife, which I thank God for that. Obviously, I have the Lord, but I've prayed specifically for men like you to come into my life, and I don't see him giving and then just taking away in that aspect. So it's going to look different, but I'm really happy for you, though. I mean, seriously, I'm happy for you because you're following the Lord and you're trusting him. And so I know you came here through Oregon to benefit my life, but also you came through Oregon, submitted to the Lord, and now you're even a stronger man than you were before. So, I mean, I'm like, just welcome to the adventure. I mean, just welcome to the excitement. I talked to Dave, our jiu-jitsu coach, on Thursday, and I was saying how, you know, at 33 years old, I feel like I'm going through a midlife adventure crisis. And he said, oh, you got to remove crisis from your vocabulary. I think you told me that. And I said, okay, midlife adventure. He goes, adventure, whatever you want to say. He goes, your 30s is a chance for you to live a life of awesomeness, is what he said. And it made me think of you. Like, I just feel that in this, all the stuff you have upcoming, even the challenges, right? You're not moved by hardship though. It's just going to be, it's going to be a decade of just awesomeness, bro. Not just in your 30s, but even after that. But that's what we're both entering into. So why not just receive it and just enjoy it? You know what I mean?
I'm on the same page and basically could just reiterate the same thing. Obviously, we've cut out a piece in each other's life that is impactful enough that I can't go without it, you know, so it will be regular conversations. I like to travel, so I'll come back out here, you know, preferably in the summer without the rain, but you never know. And there'll be things like the men's retreat and you coming out to Colorado. Like, I picture us, you know, when I was out here in Oregon, I traveled back to Colorado like 8 times last year. And so it'll be like, I could see myself traveling at least 50% of that back out to Oregon, you know, so I'll be out here every couple of months. But yeah, man, I'm honestly really appreciative for you. I've been extremely blessed by this relationship. Without it, you know, I am at a place in my life now where I have enough humility to give credit where it's due. And obviously it first goes to Christ, but then second it goes to you being that block that I needed to be refined against. And especially in a way, I was looking for brotherhood and community. And you showed me that through the willingness to go through the fire together, even though you had nothing to prove to me, but you were willing to, for your own benefit and mine. And that's kind of how I felt the entire relationship has been is, well, let's see if we're, you know, don't just talk about it, let's be about it, both of us. So I'm extremely grateful for it. We're about to dive into your books coming up next. So we'll take a quick break and then we'll kind of dive into what your future looks like. Awesome.